Okay, so we're talking
Right.
about the possibility of designing this role-playing game. And
Yes.
the question that I have is, did it begin as playing another game and it's just kind of evolved into something else through your own changes? Or is it more of a, I have a setting, so so how do I make a game of it? Which is kind of the impression I got.
Hmm.
Um,
So
or
the history is it's actually I wrote it for the Game Chef competition. So I wrote this back in like 2013 um for that one. And I was and I was encouraged because I got like runner up or something, right? Some prize, which I thought meant something, but it doesn't.
Mhm.
And but anyway, I was kind of encouraged, so I play tested what I had at that time, and which was pretty rough, because it was like I think that was like you had to do it within a week or 24 hours or something. There was some sort of time frame, right? And so so the play tests were a lot of fun, but then I it came to a point where I sort of realized the fun that we had nothing to do with the rules that I had written down. You know what I mean? It
I
was
do.
like, yeah, it was because I would ignore them a lot, and do other things. And so then I would kind of flail, or I would try to capture. And it also, like, even though people were having fun, it wasn't quite exactly the type of fun that I was looking for. Okay. And because became kind of like a horror comedy, which is which is partly what I wanted, right? And my writing sort of lends it to that kind of thing. And but there was also I wanted to have some sort of more a little bit more intensity, at least at some points, and like meaningful character choices and so on that weren't quite happening. And so then I would kind of change the rules around, try that, and I got to this point where I was just kind of I confused myself, right? Like I wasn't sure. I was kind of flailing around, changing stuff, like felt kind of like randomly without any kind of clear plan. And so then I thought, okay, I'm going to just drop everything I did, ask Ron for help, and just
Yeah.
go from the ground.
Okay. Well, ground up is probably the right phrase. As you can
Okay.
probably imagine, the first thing I want to do is sort of blowtorch the interim events and go back to when you first wrote something down. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think that the first thing or the first write up or the first inspiration is always sacred, but it is better to pretend it is and look at it that way than it is to lose your way. So, what I mean is, if we look at the time when you first wrote something down, and I don't really care if it was, you know, for a contest or not, um,
Right.
I'm more interested in what makes a person or where a person is at when they write down what they want to put in the contest rather than what the contest wanted them to do. Right. So,
Right.
whatever the terms were or anything like that doesn't really matter. What we're looking at is what you wrote down first and what, more importantly, what was on your mind. One of the problems with any such thing is that it's already kind of a performance piece when you submit it. It's already
Okay.
transitive from you to them. And
Mm-hmm.
at this point, I kind of want to pretend that didn't happen. Instead, say if you were just writing down what you liked, what was on there at that time, what would have been on there at that time. Um, so that can either be in reference to inspirational material, or it could be in reference to playing a certain way, or it could even, I mean, sometimes it's just an image or a phrase, right? So,
Okay.
what comes to mind in that regard? What's sort of your, oh, I can write this, or I want to write this, and or I want to play this. What are the basics of that for this thing? If
So the basics. would be, I guess, two in general terms. It would be two things. One would be um, the setting, the inspiration for the setting, and which is, this kind of over the top disto. It would be like if people really believed Ayn Rand stuff, right? And there are these aliens. It's like, um, have you read any of the Expanse books or that
I
kind of
haven't read
stuff?
the books, but I saw the series. But go on.
You something Okay, so imagine that, but like combined with V and Logan's Run, right?
Right.
So that kind of, it's really like a kind of a dark setting, but with like there's a little bit of humor to it,
Hmm.
right? And then playtest people went that way. Like the setting was kind of so dark, right? That people kind of went to humor as a sort
Hmm.
of to lighten things up, right?
Right.
Which was fine. I enjoyed that.
No, I think there's pieces
Um,
of that. If you actually read early William Gibson, there's a lot less
hmm.
pretense and a little more fun in it, I think. So like the
In
original,
the early William
yeah,
Gibson,
if you read like the original Neuromancer, it's actually pretty likable
yeah.
in a lot of ways. Um, the I mean, well, Case goes off and gets high, and you're kind of on his side for going off and getting high,
I see. Right.
stuff like
Okay.
that. So the deal with um this look. Okay, so you say that there are two things. One is this setting and the feel
Right.
of the setting in particular,
Hmm.
and then there's the other thing, which would have been what?
The other thing was an idea I had at the time that I'm not sure has any merit any longer, but it was a mechanical kind of thing where, uh, to the extent that I can remember, this was back in like 2013, I think. So to the extent I remember, it was sort of like, I noticed that in sometimes during play in other games, right? If somebody was, like if somebody had a lot of bad rolls, right? And then it could get like really depressing. Or if it was too easy and people were just winning again and again and again, then it would become like a little too easy. And so I had a kind of mechanic in there that, like for every failed roll, I don't remember exactly how it worked, but for every failed roll, you'd get some sort of a chip or something that you could use later,
Right.
right? So that it would be,
Hmm.
yeah. And like the reverse happened if there were many good rolls,
Right.
there would
Right.
start to be like
Okay.
danger would,
Yeah. No, I get
so
that. I
something
get that.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So with that in mind, um,
Hmm.
two things need to be asked,
Hmm.
and they're related. They're like one to one with what you just said. Okay, so
Okay.
it's super easy to ask these in terms of the setting, and remembering that we don't play settings, we play situations.
Right.
That's the if we do play, if we look at sort of the starting characters and the starting circumstances that they're in, and whatever backstory is relevant to that for this particular place. Um, when we're done playing, and by done, I'm being very vague, just done insofar as it needs to be for purposes of this question, what has changed? How are the characters different? How is the situation different?
Right. So the characters would have made uh, important choices, in particular in their relationships to um, each other and like with humanity in general. So, so that like if you look at the question, if you look at like my list of inspirations, like one of the things that I'm always thinking about is, what is the real nature of humanity, right? Are we like these competitive
Mm-hmm.
dog eat dog kind of things, like some people would say, or is there something else going on? And so the the characters would make choices to fall somewhere in that spectrum and
Okay.
then by the end you would. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
so I'm not necessarily sure about ending at the moment, but at the point where
Okay.
we can track a change, um, particularly change which isn't just labile and can just go back and bounce around, but change that gets us
Right.
somewhere. I could be wrong, but it seems to me as though I would want to focus on the difference between two sessions, an early one and a later session,
It's
and
interesting.
the beginnings of those sessions. So in the first one, we meet our characters for the first time, and they're in various circumstances or one circumstance altogether. I don't care, but they are where they are, right? As made up. That's the characters.
Hmm.
And the backstory of what they're facing is what it is. It's been brought in. It's novel to play, just like the characters are. Everything is novel to play. It's the first time we played. So there you are. And it's coming from wherever it comes from. I don't care if we have some sort of collective process of determining, the situation, or if it's one person or whatever. But whatever it is, it's now in play.
Okay.
Now let's compare a later session. Considerable
Hmm.
numbers of things have happened. Whatever metric or soft metric or anything that indicates where the characters are in this spectrum of ideology that you're talking about, is they've gone where they're going, right? Whether they can
Hmm.
change again, I don't know, but they've gone where they're going. And we're looking at it. What I want to know is what are the procedures for making, not just the procedures, but the result of making the new situation for them to be facing. Does it take into account what has happened in play so far? In other words, has the situation changed in actual pragmatic play terms?
So, by saying a later session, do you mean like the final one like we're gonna okay, this is gonna be the end of our campaign, or is
Absolutely
it?
not.
Oh, okay. So you mean just any session after the first?
Right, but I'm going to
Okay.
presume that they've had some sort of impact on the actors that caused the backstory. They've had some sort of impact on what other NPCs wanted. They've had some
Right.
sort of effect, or play has had some sort of effect on everybody involved, not just the player characters. There's
Right.
been, right,
Okay.
that's what I mean.
Okay.
Everybody has had to deal with the relevant changes based on the events of play.
Okay.
Everybody.
Right. And so you want to know, your question is, what are the procedures that determine that?
Well, not quite in
That
that. I'm a little afraid of
Okay.
asking for specific mechanics. I'm
Right.
asking for a more concrete question, which is actually very concrete.
Okay.
Do the previous events of play actually change the situation so that this later situation can be considered consequential of what happened in the first or the
Well, yeah,
previous?
I would hope so. Otherwise,
Well, that's the
what's the
question.
point?
Oh,
Okay.
yes, but you can think of any number of games where that's absolutely not the case. It's only through the goodwill of the GM by deciding that why we shall continue with our saga. But frankly, the 17th mission given to you by the vampire prince of the region is not really very different from the first mission given by the vampire prince of the region.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you mean like they could be essentially unconnected. Okay, I see. Um,
Well, I mean,
right.
and also, I mean,
Yeah.
in some of the very old dungeon crawl games like Tunnels and Trolls, it
Hmm.
was allowed in the rules or said so. I mean, it was implied and sort of hinted at or mentioned briefly in the rules that upon returning to the dungeon, the player characters would discover that the denizens had realized that they better do something about these encroaching heroes, and the dungeon would be changed. You don't just clear the first level and then come back
Right.
to a cleared first level. Somebody's been doing
Hmm.
something there. And in that case, the dungeon as we now encounter it is not the same dungeon that it was before the player characters showed up.
Right.
And Many people will tell you that that's their ideal of play in such a game, but how many people actually do it,
Yeah.
right? That's what I'm
Yeah. No,
talking
I
about.
understand that.